Snow had buried the market square beneath a pale, glittering silence, but the silence broke wherever Evelyn Hartwell walked. At 24, she had learned that pregnancy could make a woman both visible and invisible. Everyone stared at the curve beneath her faded cream dress, yet no one saw the frightened human being carrying it. Her gray cloak was thin against the January wind, and one gloved hand held a small basket of bread while the other rested protectively beneath her swollen belly. 7 months. 7 months since she had carried Julian Wycliffe's child. 7 months since the world had decided that the man she loved was a murderer, a thief, and a traitor. 7 months since Julian had vanished. Evelyn lowered her eyes as she crossed the square. She needed bread, medicine for her headaches, and enough coal to survive. She had counted every coin. The whispers began before she reached the baker. Look at her. Shameless. She claims the Wycliffe blood runs in that child. A bastard more likely. Evelyn kept walking. She had discovered that answering cruelty only gave it strength. Silence was the last possession poverty had not taken from her. Then a voice rose above the others. Ask her where Lord Wycliffe is. The crowd turned. Evelyn stopped. An old woman near the fountain pointed accusingly at her. If she truly was his wife, why did he flee without her? He did not flee, Evelyn said softly. The woman laughed. Someone shouted, Gold digger. A man called her a liar. Then something struck her shoulder. An egg burst against her cloak, its yolk sliding down the gray wool. Evelyn flinched. A second egg hit the snow beside her. Then came a tomato. It struck her cheek with a wet, ugly slap. For a heartbeat, the square froze. Evelyn touched her face. Her fingers came away red. The laughter began again. More tomatoes flew. She stumbled backward, clutching her belly with both arms as the crowd pressed closer. Her basket fell and the loaf rolled through the snow. Leave the Wycliffe bastard here. Let her take her shame somewhere else. The child will carry a traitor's blood. Evelyn bent over instinctively, shielding the life inside her from every hand and thrown object. My child has done nothing wrong, she whispered. Nobody listened. Another tomato flew toward her. A gloved hand caught it in midair. The laughter died. At the far end of the square stood a black carriage, its horses steaming in the bitter cold. The carriage door had opened, and a tall man in a dark winter coat was walking toward them. Duke Adrian Blackthorne. Evelyn knew him immediately. Everyone did. He was 36, powerful enough that magistrates chose their words carefully around him. Snow settled on his black hair and shoulders as he crossed the square, the captured tomato still resting in his gloved hand. He stopped between Evelyn and the crowd. His gaze moved over the broken eggs, stained snow, discarded bread, and finally the woman trembling behind him. Something hardened in his expression. The next person, he said quietly, who throws anything at her will answer to me. No one moved. Adrian dropped the tomato into the snow. Then, without asking permission, he removed his heavy coat and placed it around Evelyn's shoulders. Warmth engulfed her. For the first time that morning she felt safe enough to breathe. Adrian looked down at her. Are you hurt? Evelyn shook her head, though tears burned behind her eyes. Not badly. His eyes lowered to her stomach. You are carrying Wycliffe's child. It was not a question. Yes. And you knew Julian? Evelyn's fingers tightened around the edge of his coat. I knew him better than anyone. A flicker crossed Adrian's face. Julian had once been his closest friend. Before disgrace swallowed the Wycliffe name, before Julian was accused of murdering his father, stealing government money, and selling military secrets, Adrian had trusted him with his life. He had never believed the accusations. Now he studied Evelyn as though an old puzzle had suddenly acquired its missing piece. Where is your husband? The word struck her harder than the tomatoes. My husband disappeared. Adrian's expression changed. Disappeared? He did not abandon me, she whispered. He promised he would return. She reached beneath her dress and drew out a silver locket hanging from a chain around her neck. 3 days before he vanished, Julian gave me this. Adrian stared at it. The crest was engraved across its surface. His face went still. He took one step closer. That crest, he murmured. Evelyn looked up at him through tear-bright eyes. He told me to keep it hidden. He said that if anything happened to him, I must trust no one. Adrian reached toward the locket, then stopped before touching it. Behind them, the crowd remained silent. But high above the square, behind a frost-covered window, another pair of eyes had been watching. A curtain shifted. A hand withdrew. Moments later, a folded message passed into the hands of a servant. Its words were brief. The Duke has found her. By the time the black carriage reached Blackthorne House, dusk had turned the snowfields blue. Evelyn sat rigidly beneath Adrian's coat, listening to the wheels grind over frozen earth. She had expected questions, suspicion, perhaps another polite rejection. She had not expected safety, and that frightened her almost as much as the cruelty in the square. The Duke's estate rose from the winter mist like a fortress, its windows glowing amber against the storm. Servants hurried forward when the carriage stopped, but their welcoming expressions faltered when they saw Evelyn descend. A pregnant woman. A disgraced lord's supposed mistress. A scandal wrapped in a borrowed coat. Adrian noticed the looks. "She is my guest," he said. The head housekeeper bowed. "Of course, Your Grace." "No," Adrian replied, his voice sharpening. "She is to be treated as a lady." Evelyn looked at him, startled. He did not look back. Inside, warmth rushed over her. Firelight shimmered across polished floors, and the scent of cedar smoke replaced the bitter smell of snow. Someone brought hot tea. Another servant carried away her ruined cloak. Yet Evelyn remained tense, as though kindness were a trap she had not learned to recognize. Adrian noticed. "You may leave whenever you wish." "Where would I go?" The question escaped before she could stop it. Something in his expression softened. "You will remain here tonight." She lowered her gaze. "Your household will suffer for it." "My household," he said, "will learn that I make my own decisions." That night, Evelyn slept in a chamber overlooking the snow-covered gardens. For the first time in months, she had a locked door, a warm fire, and enough food beside her bed. Still, sleep refused to come. Near midnight there was a knock. Adrian stood outside. "I need to ask you something." Evelyn stepped aside. He entered only after she permitted him. "Tell me everything you know about Julian." She hesitated, then reached beneath the mattress and withdrew a folded paper. Adrian unfolded it. His eyes widened. A marriage certificate. The names were unmistakable. Evelyn Hartwell and Lord Julian Wycliffe. The date was nearly a year earlier. "Where did you get this?" "Julian gave it to me." Adrian looked at her sharply. "You were married before his disappearance?" "We were." "Why was it hidden?" "Because Julian knew his enemies would use me against him." Her voice trembled, but she continued. "I was working as a village nurse when I found him. He had been wounded and was hiding from men who wanted him dead. I treated him in a small cottage. He was stubborn, frightened, and kinder than anyone believed." A faint smile touched her lips. "He would complain about my medicines, then thank me when he thought I wasn't listening." Adrian remained silent. Evelyn's smile faded. "We married quietly. Julian said he wanted a life where nobody cared about his title. He wanted a home filled with ordinary things." Her hand settled over her belly. Then he discovered what his stepmother and her allies were doing. Adrian's jaw tightened. "Beatrice." Evelyn nodded. "She and Marcus were moving money through Wycliffe companies. Julian found records connecting them to stolen military information. He believed his father had discovered the truth too. And then? Julian told me he had to leave before they found us. Before he went, he held my hand and promised he would return." Her eyes filled. "He said, 'If I fail, protect our child.'" Adrian looked away. He remembered Julian years ago, laughing beside a river, speaking about loyalty as though it were sacred. He remembered promising his friend that if danger ever came, he would stand beside him. He had failed to do so. "I should have believed him sooner," Adrian whispered. Evelyn studied him. "You never believed he was guilty." "No." "Why?" "Because Julian was many things," Adrian said. "Reckless, proud, infuriating, but never a traitor." For the first time, Evelyn felt the loneliness between them lessen. Then Adrian noticed the silver locket. "May I see it?" She handed it to him. He turned it over beneath the candlelight. "There is a seam." He pressed his thumbnail against the edge. A tiny panel sprang open. Inside lay a narrow strip of paper. Adrian unfolded it carefully. For words stared back at them. "The chapel remembers everything." Evelyn's breath caught. "What does it mean?" Adrian's face became grim. "The old Wycliffe chapel." Before he could say more, a crash shattered the silence downstairs. They froze. Footsteps raced through the corridor. Adrian moved in front of Evelyn. The servant screamed. Then came the sound of breaking glass. Adrian drew his pistol. "Stay here." But Evelyn seized his sleeve. "I will not hide." Another crash thundered below. They descended together. At the end of the corridor, a window stood open to the snow. The intruder was gone. Only footprints remained. And across the frost-covered glass, written from the inside with one gloved finger, were 6 terrible words. The child must never be born. Evelyn stared at those words, suddenly understanding that Julian's enemies had not forgotten her or the child unborn. Morning came reluctantly to Blackthorne House. Snow pressed against the windows, turning the world beyond them into a white blur, while the warning written across the frost remained in Evelyn's mind long after the glass had been cleaned. The child must never be born. Those words had transformed fear into certainty. Whoever had destroyed Julian's name knew she existed. Whoever had watched her in the market knew where she was. And now someone had entered the Duke's house to make their threat unmistakable. Adrian spent the morning examining every detail of the intrusion. The broken window, the muddy imprint beside it, the faint scrape on the sill, nothing escaped his attention. He questioned servants personally and ordered guards around the estate. Evelyn watched from the library doorway. "You think they will return?" she said. "They will." "You sound certain." "I am." He turned toward her. "Which is why we leave for Wycliffe Chapel before noon." The journey was made under a gray sky, with 2 riders ahead and 2 behind. Evelyn sat beside Adrian in the carriage, wrapped in wool and silence. She could feel his restraint. He wanted to reassure her, but Adrian Blackthorne seemed built from discipline rather than comforting words. At last, the ruined chapel appeared beyond a grove of snow-laden yews. The Wycliffe Chapel had been abandoned for years. Its stone walls were cracked, its iron door rusted, and the saints carved above the entrance had lost their faces to time. Evelyn stepped inside. Cold air smelled of dust and ancient stone. "This was Julian's childhood chapel," she whispered. Adrian lifted a lantern. Then perhaps he knew something here that others forgot. They searched the altar, the crypt entrance, and the old family pews. Nothing. Then Evelyn noticed a loose stone beneath the carved Wycliffe crest. Her heart quickened. Adrian knelt beside her and pried it upward. Beneath it lay a narrow ledger wrapped in oilcloth. Evelyn stared. "Julian." Adrian opened the book. Names filled the pages. Dates. Payments. Amounts transferred through Wycliffe shipping companies. Several entries carried the initials of government officials. Then Adrian found one name that made his expression darken. Sir Edmund Vane. The respected magistrate had received enormous sums from a Wycliffe account. "He helped condemn Julian," Evelyn whispered. "And he was being paid by someone inside the family." Adrian turned another page. A section had been torn away. "The missing page," he said. A sound echoed beyond the chapel doors. They both froze. Snow crunched outside. Then another step. Adrian extinguished the lantern. "Stay behind me." 3 shadows crossed the stained glass. Men entered. The first raised a pistol. Adrian fired first. The chapel exploded into chaos. Evelyn ducked behind a stone pillar as gunshots shattered the silence. Adrian struck one attacker with the butt of his pistol, then drove another against the altar. "Run." Evelyn ran toward the side passage. An attacker caught her cloak. She twisted free, but the fabric tore. Adrian reached her seconds later. "Are you hurt?" "No." "Then move." They fled through a narrow doorway concealed behind the chapel wall. The passage descended beneath the earth. Evelyn gripped Adrian's arm as they stumbled down uneven steps. Behind them voices echoed. "They went this way." The passage opened into a chamber hidden beneath the chapel. Adrian raised his lantern. There was a narrow bed in the corner. A blanket. An empty cup. Fresh ashes still glowing inside a stone fireplace. Someone had been living there. Recently. Evelyn stepped forward. "Julian?" No answer. Then she saw the wall. 2 letters had been carved deeply into the wood. J.W. Her breath vanished. Beneath the initials was another sentence, cut with trembling strokes. "Evelyn, if you are reading this, I failed to come home." She touched the words. For months she had mourned a living man without knowing it. Now her grief changed shape. "Adrian," she whispered. He stood beside her, staring at the inscription. "This was written recently." Evelyn looked at him. "Then he was here." Adrian nodded slowly. "But that means Julian may still be alive." The realization should have filled her with joy. Instead, Evelyn felt terror. Because if Julian had survived long enough to leave that message, someone else might have known he was alive too. A sudden metallic click sounded behind them. Adrian turned. At the mouth of the passage stood a man in black, holding a pistol. His face remained hidden beneath his hood. But his voice was unmistakably calm. "You should never have opened the chapel." He raised the weapon. Evelyn instinctively covered her unborn child. and from somewhere beyond the stone wall came a faint, unmistakable sound. 3 knocks. Adrian pulled Evelyn behind the pillar as the pistol fired. Stones splintered above them. The hooded man rushed forward, but Adrian kicked the lantern toward him. Flames scattered across the floor, forcing the attacker backward. The 3 knocks came again. Evelyn turned toward the wall. Someone is behind it. Adrian found an iron ring beneath the carved initials and pulled. A door swung inward, revealing darkness and another passage. Go, he ordered. They disappeared through it as smoke filled chapel. Behind them, the hidden door slammed shut. For a moment, Evelyn pressed a hand against her belly. Her child moved. She stared down, tears gathering. For the first time, she believed Julian had not abandoned them. He had been fighting home. The hidden passage carried them into a narrow tunnel where the air smelled of wet earth and extinguished fire. Adrian went first, lantern raised, while Evelyn followed with one hand against the wall and the other beneath her belly. At last, the tunnel opened behind a stand of yew trees several hundred yards from the chapel. Snow swept across the ground, erasing their footprints almost as quickly as they made them. Adrian turned toward Evelyn. Are you certain you are unharmed? She nodded. I am more frightened for Julian than for myself. You believe he is alive. I have to. Adrian looked toward the ruined chapel. So do I. They returned to Blackthorne House before sunset. Adrian doubled the guard. Yet Evelyn could not shake the feeling that the greatest danger was inside the mystery surrounding Julian. That evening, she sat beside the library fire while Adrian studied the ledger. His sleeves were rolled to his forearms, his dark hair disordered from the journey, and for the first time she saw something beneath his formidable composure. Exhaustion. You should rest, she said. So should you. I have spent months resting. Then you have spent months worrying. A smile touched her mouth. And you have spent years pretending you do not worry. Adrian looked at her. Then he closed the ledger. Julian once saved my life. Evelyn listened. We were 20. I was reckless. He was worse. We rode into a flooded valley during a military exercise and my horse threw me. Julian went back for me when everyone else had retreated. His voice softened. He nearly drowned. But he returned. He always did. Evelyn lowered her gaze. He promised he would return to me. Adrian's expression tightened. I believe him. Those 3 words struck her with surprising force. For months, everyone had told her she was foolish for waiting. Adrian did not. The next morning, a physician arrived at Blackthorne House. Evelyn protested that she was well, but Adrian insisted she be examined after the previous night's danger. The physician smiled after listening to the heartbeat. Strong, he said. Very strong. Evelyn closed her eyes as the rhythmic sound filled the room. Adrian stood near the window. When the examination ended, he quietly asked whether the baby needed anything. Warmth, good food, and peace. Then she shall have all 3. Evelyn looked at him. You said she. Adrian glanced toward her belly. I suppose I did. You think it is a girl? I hope so. Why? Because Julian once told me he wanted a daughter. Evelyn's heart tightened. What if he never comes home? Adrian did not answer immediately. Instead, he crossed the room and placed a small bundle beside the fireplace. Evelyn opened it. Inside was a cradle carved from pale oak. She stared. I cannot accept this. You can. You barely know me. I know enough. She touched the smooth wood. You bought this for the baby? I had it made. Something warm and painful moved through her. You did not have to. I know. That answer affected her more than any grand declaration could have. Adrian had not acted from obligation alone. He had chosen to care. Evelyn began recovering from the fear that had followed her into Blackthorne House. She walked through the gardens, read beside the library fire, and sometimes found Adrian there without either of them remembering who had entered first. He never treated her pregnancy as a burden. He asked whether she was warm, whether she had eaten, whether the child was moving. He spoke to her with the same respect he would have shown a duchess. Slowly, Evelyn began seeing the man behind the title. Adrian had no wife, no children, and no family who understood him. His estate was magnificent, but its corridors felt empty. One evening, Evelyn found him alone in the music room. You are unhappy here, she said. He looked toward the dark windows. I am accustomed to silence. That is not what I asked. A faint smile appeared. No, it is not. He looked at her, and something unspoken passed between them. Neither crossed the distance. Neither dared. The next morning, Adrian received a sealed letter. He read it once. Then again. The color drained from his face. Evelyn rose from her chair. What is it? Adrian folded the paper. The prison estate belonging to Sir Edmund Vane. Her heart began pounding. What about it? Someone saw a man matching Julian's description being taken there 3 months ago. Evelyn gripped the chair. Then we must go. Adrian's eyes hardened. You are staying here. No. You are 7 months pregnant. And Julian is my husband. I know. Then you know I am going. Adrian stepped closer. For the first time his controlled voice broke. I will not let another man's conspiracy take you from this world. Evelyn stared at him. Then he lowered his voice. I give you my word, Evelyn. I will find Julian. And I will bring you both home. But before dawn, Evelyn discovered that Adrian had already left. She found his empty room, his discarded gloves, and a single note on the table. Do not follow me. Evelyn stared at the words. Then she heard hooves pounding outside. She looked through the window. A second rider was leaving the estate. And she recognized the horse. It was hers. Adrian had taken her only horse so she could not follow. The Duke had underestimated one thing. He had protected her long enough to teach her courage. By sunrise, Evelyn was already dressed for the journey, with Julian's silver locket against her heart and a shawl wrapped firmly around her shoulders. If Adrian was going into the darkness to find her husband, she would not remain behind and wait for another man to disappear. By nightfall, Evelyn reached the abandoned estate. The journey had exhausted her, but fear had kept her upright. Adrian's warning echoed in her mind, yet every mile towards Sir Edmund Vane's property felt less like disobedience and more like reclaiming the future Julian had promised her. She found Adrian's carriage hidden beside a ruined barn. One horse was injured and blood marked the snow. Then she heard voices beneath the earth. Adrian emerged from a stone doorway with his pistol drawn. Evelyn. I told you I was coming. His face tightened with relief and anger. You could have been killed. So could you. For one suspended moment, neither spoke. Then Evelyn noticed the blood on his sleeve. Are you hurt? Not mine. He stepped aside. A narrow staircase descended beneath the estate. Julian is below. Evelyn gripped the railing. They descended together. The underground chamber smelled of damp stone, iron, and smoke. 2 guards lay unconscious near the wall. Adrian had already defeated them, but a third door remained locked. He raised his pistol. Stand back. The lock shattered. Inside, a man sat chained to the wall. He was thin beyond recognition. His dark hair had grown long, his face was hollow, and bruises darkened his temples. Yet when he lifted his head, Evelyn knew him. Julian. His eyes widened. For several seconds, neither moved. Then Evelyn crossed the room. Julian stared at her belly. His lips trembled. Our child? Evelyn nodded through tears. Julian closed his eyes as though the sight had broken something inside him. I thought I would never see you again. She dropped beside him. I thought you abandoned me. I would have crawled across England to reach you. His voice was barely more than a whisper. They never let me. Adrian knelt and cut through the chains. Julian nearly collapsed. Adrian caught him. For a moment, the 2 men stared at each other. You came, Julian said. I should have come sooner. You believed me. I always did. Julian looked at Evelyn. Then you were safer than I was. They carried him into the abandoned barn and wrapped him in blankets. Evelyn warmed broth while Adrian examined his wounds. Julian finally spoke. My father discovered Beatrice and Marcus were moving stolen military information through our shipping companies. Money passed through accounts controlled by Sir Edmund Vane. Your stepmother killed him? Adrian asked. Julian nodded. She poisoned him first. When he survived, Marcus finished the murder. They staged the room to make it appear I had attacked him. Evelyn covered her mouth. They forged the military documents afterward, Julian continued. Then they spread rumors that I had fled with government money. Why didn't you expose them? Adrian asked. I tried. Julian reached beneath his torn shirt and produced a small brass key. I stole the original ledger before they caught me. But Vane took it. Evelyn touched her locket. The key. Julian looked at it. Yes. The locket was meant to lead you to the chapel ledger. Adrian's expression darkened. The missing page. Julian nodded. That page names the man who ordered everything. Vane? No. The word chilled the room. Vane is only the magistrate. He works for someone more powerful. Before anyone could ask, a distant horn sounded outside. Julian stiffened. They found us. Adrian rose. How many? Enough. Evelyn moved toward Julian. He caught her hand. There is something else you must know. What? They did not keep me alive because they wanted information. His gaze dropped toward her unborn child. They kept me alive because they were waiting for my child to be born. Evelyn's blood turned cold. Why? Julian looked at Adrian. Because my child is the proof they cannot destroy. Adrian's face hardened. What proof? Julian reached for Evelyn's shawl. The night I disappeared, I hid the final evidence inside your clothes. Evelyn froze. My shawl? The one you wore when I kissed you goodbye. She pulled the shawl from her shoulders. Julian touched the embroidered border. Inside the lining. Adrian took a knife and carefully opened the seam. A folded sheet slipped into his hand. Evelyn stared at it. Julian whispered, "That document proves my father discovered the conspiracy before he died." Julian struggled to stand, refusing the blankets. "I can fight." "You can barely walk," Adrian said. "I spent months chained in darkness. I will not hide behind you now." Evelyn touched his arm. "You have already survived enough." Julian looked at her, then at the child beneath her heart. "For them I will survive anything." The word steadied Evelyn. This was not the broken prisoner she had found. Beneath the scars was the man who had once promised to return. Adrian opened the document. His eyes widened. "Evelyn, this is a list of names." Julian nodded. "Every man involved." At the bottom was a seal Evelyn recognized from the Wycliffe archives. Beside it stood a signature that made Adrian's blood run cold. It belonged to a man trusted by the crown, a name powerful enough to silence witnesses, judges, and entire towns forever. But before he could read it, the barn doors exploded inward. Men poured through the smoke. Julian shouted, "Take Evelyn and go." Adrian stepped between them. "No." A gunshot cracked through the darkness. Evelyn shielded her belly. And somewhere beyond the flames, a familiar voice calmly ordered, "Kill the Duke first." The gunshot shattered the barn. Adrian shoved Evelyn behind a stone pillar as another bullet tore through the wooden wall. Julian, barely able to stand, seized a fallen pistol. "Stay down," Adrian ordered. Men stormed through the smoke. Their boots struck the frozen earth, their faces hidden beneath black scarves. One rushed Julian, but Julian fired first, sending the attacker crashing against a hay trough. Evelyn heard shouting outside. "They're surrounding the estate." Adrian looked toward the doorway. "We cannot hold them here." Julian pointed toward the woods. "There is an old carriage road beyond the northern wall. Then we use it." They moved through the snow under cover of darkness. Adrian supported Julian while Evelyn followed close behind, one hand gripping her shawl and the other protecting her belly. The storm erased their tracks, but it also concealed the men pursuing them. They reached a small hunting lodge hidden among the trees. Adrian barred the door. For several minutes there was only breathing. Then Julian looked at Evelyn. "They are not chasing the ledger." "I know. They are chasing our child." Evelyn swallowed. "Why?" Julian's expression filled with grief. "Because the child carries my blood and my blood gives them a problem they cannot solve." Adrian turned. "Explain." "My father changed his will before he died. He intended to expose Beatrice, Marcus, and Vane. But he also left proof that Julian Wycliffe's legitimate heir would inherit everything unless the accusations against me were proven." Evelyn stared at him. "They want the child gone before the truth becomes undeniable." Julian nodded. "The moment my child is born, the succession becomes public. They cannot erase the Wycliffe line without exposing themselves." Adrian's hands closed into fists. "They used the town against Evelyn because they wanted her isolated." "And frightened," Julian said. "A frightened woman is easier to silence." Evelyn remembered the market square. The eggs. The tomatoes. The voices telling her that her child was shame. Suddenly the humiliation looked different. It had never been random cruelty. Someone had encouraged it. Someone had wanted her to disappear. A horse whinnied outside. Adrian raised his pistol. "They found us." The lodge erupted into violence. A bullet shattered the window. Julian pulled Evelyn behind a table while Adrian returned fire. Snow blew through the broken glass, carrying smoke into the room. Then the rear door burst open. A masked man seized Evelyn. She cried out. Julian lunged, but another attacker struck him down. Adrian fired. The masked man dragged Evelyn into the storm before the bullet could reach him. "Evelyn." She fought desperately. Her captor pulled her toward an abandoned carriage house. "Give us the document." "I don't have it." "You have something better?" His hand moved toward her belly. Evelyn recoiled. No. The carriage house doors slammed shut. Inside waited two men and a lantern. One carried a knife. The other held the missing ledger page. Evelyn stared at it. You already have the evidence. We have enough to destroy the Duke, the older man said. But your child could still restore Julian. You will not touch my baby. The man smiled coldly. You misunderstand. We do not need to touch the child. He stepped closer. We only need the world to believe it never belonged to Julian. Evelyn's fear hardened into anger. You spent months teaching England to hate me. Because hatred is useful. You forgot something. What? Adrian knows the truth. The man laughed. The Duke will be dead before sunrise. Evelyn looked toward the barred door. No. He will come. Outside a bell rang. What? Twice. Then again. The attackers exchanged glances. What is that? Evelyn smiled faintly. The Blackthorne signal. The door exploded inward. Adrian entered through the smoke, sword in hand. Behind him came Julian, pale but standing. Release my wife, Julian said. The older man froze. Julian stepped forward. You stole my name. You stole my home. You chained me beneath the earth. His voice grew stronger. But you will not steal my child. Marcus emerged from the shadows. Evelyn recognized him immediately. Julian's half-brother smiled. You still think this is about inheritance? Julian stared. Marcus lifted the ledger page. It is about power. Then he turned toward Evelyn. And the child is the only witness who can destroy everything. Adrian stepped between them. You will not reach her. Marcus laughed. You still don't understand, Duke? He held up the paper. The person who ordered Julian's father's murder is not Beatrice. Adrian's expression changed. Marcus whispered a name. A name so powerful that even Adrian went silent. Before anyone could move, Marcus struck the lantern to the floor. Flames raced across the oil-soaked boards. Smoke swallowed the room. Adrian seized Evelyn and carried her through the flames while Julian fought his way after them. Behind them, Marcus escaped into the storm. But the ledger page remained in Evelyn's hand. She had taken it from him without realizing. Adrian looked down. Evelyn. She opened her trembling fingers. At the bottom of the page was the signature they had been searching for. It belonged to Sir Edmund Vane. But beneath his name was another seal. The royal seal. And beside it, a second signature belonging to someone who had been trusted to investigate Julian's disgrace from the beginning. Evelyn stared at the seal, her fear suddenly giving way to a terrible understanding. This conspiracy reached far beyond Wycliffe House, beyond Vane, beyond the magistrates who had condemned Julian. Someone had used the machinery of authority itself to bury the truth. Adrian folded the page carefully, his face grim. Now, he said, we know why they were willing to burn an entire estate to silence you and your child. Spring arrived late, but the thaw finally loosened winter's grip on England. Snow receded from the streets around Wycliffe, revealing muddy roads and the bruised remnants of the season that had nearly destroyed Evelyn Hartwell's life. Inside the county court, however, the air felt colder than January. Julian Wycliffe stood beneath the high oak beams, thinner than the portrait hanging behind the judge, but upright. He wore a dark coat borrowed from Adrian. The chains were gone, yet months of captivity had left their marks around his wrists. Across the chamber sat Lady Beatrice and Marcus. Beatrice wore black silk and an expression of wounded dignity. Marcus appeared almost bored. Sir Edmund Vane sat among the magistrates, his face composed. Then the doors opened. Evelyn entered beside Adrian. Every whisper stopped. She was no longer the frightened woman from the market square. Her pregnancy was unmistakable, and the silver locket rested openly against her throat. Some townspeople lowered their eyes. Others stared. She walked toward the witness bench. Julian looked at her. For one fragile moment, the courtroom disappeared. He smiled. Evelyn smiled back. Then Adrian placed the evidence upon the table. The prosecution accused Lord Wycliffe of treason, murder, and theft, he said. Today we will prove that every charge was constructed. The first witness was Thomas Reed, the former Wycliffe stable master. His hands trembled as he approached. I saw Lord Wycliffe leave the estate on the night his father died, Thomas said. He was alive, frightened, and carrying documents. Vane rose. You were dismissed years ago. I was, Thomas answered. Because I refused to lie. A murmur passed through the court. Thomas continued. Lord Marcus ordered me to prepare a carriage for his brother. But before Julian could leave, armed men seized him near the East Road. Marcus's face tightened. That is absurd. Thomas pointed at him. You were there. The second witness was a clerk who had examined Wycliffe's financial records. He demonstrated that the government payments supposedly stolen by Julian had been transferred after Julian had already disappeared. The third witness was a former prisoner from Vane's underground estate. He identified the chains. He identified the guards. And he identified Julian. He was kept there under orders from Sir Edmund Vane. Vane finally lost his composure. You are criminals. Your testimony means nothing. Adrian stood. Then perhaps the documents will. He presented the ledger from the chapel. Names, payments, dates, military codes. Every page connected Beatrice, Marcus, and Vane. Beatrice rose suddenly. This is forged. Evelyn looked at her. No. Beatrice turned. Evelyn reached beneath her cloak and produced the original page recovered from the burning carriage house. This is the page you were afraid I would keep. Silence fell. The signature of Sir Edmund Vane appeared at the bottom. Beside it was the seal of the official who had supervised Julian's original investigation. Then the doors opened again. 2 royal investigators entered with armed guards. Behind them walked a pale man carrying sealed correspondence. He bowed before the judge. We have recovered the remaining records. Vane's face collapsed. The final letters contained his orders, his handwriting, his payments, his instructions to silence witnesses, and one sentence that destroyed everything. Ensure Lord Wycliffe is condemned before the child is born. Evelyn felt Julian's hand close around hers. The judge read the sentence aloud. The crowd understood that her unborn child had been the reason the conspiracy feared her. Vane was arrested. Marcus followed. Beatrice collapsed into her chair, finally stripped of the elegance that had protected her. When the judgment came, Julian's name was cleared. The court formally restored his title, his inheritance, and his reputation. But Julian did not celebrate. He turned toward Evelyn. I am sorry. She shook her head. You survived. I should have found you. You were chained in a prison. His eyes filled. I still should have found you. Evelyn embraced him. For the first time since his disappearance, Julian held his wife without fear. The townspeople waited outside as they emerged. The market square where Evelyn had been humiliated was visible beyond the courthouse. An old woman approached first. Her face was wet with tears. I was cruel to you. Evelyn looked at her. The woman lowered her head slowly. I believed them. So did many. I am ashamed. Evelyn could have demanded an apology from every person present. Instead, she said quietly, then remember what it felt like to be wrong. One by one, people bowed their heads. Adrian stood several steps away. He watched Evelyn with an expression Julian noticed immediately. Later, Julian found him alone outside the courthouse. You love her, Julian said. Adrian did not deny it. I would never use what happened to take her from you. I know. Julian looked toward Evelyn. She loves deeply. That is why she stayed when the world told her to leave me. Adrian swallowed. I know. But people change. Adrian met his eyes. So do circumstances. Julian gave a tired smile. Then give her something better than gratitude. Adrian understood. Before they returned to Blackthorne House, Julian made one final decision. He would not stand between Evelyn and the future she deserved. But Evelyn had not yet heard that decision. And when she did, it would force her to choose between the husband whose survival had once been her greatest prayer and the Duke who had become her refuge when that prayer seemed impossible. Spring came softly to Blackthorne House, melting the last ribbons of snow from the gardens and filling the bare branches with tentative green. Yet Evelyn still remembered winter whenever she looked toward the market road. Months earlier, she had walked there alone beneath a gray cloak, protecting her unborn child while strangers threw eggs and tomatoes at her. Now she crossed the same road beside Adrian, no longer hiding her face. The townspeople moved aside, some bowing, others watching in silence. Evelyn no longer needed their acceptance. She had learned that dignity could survive humiliation, truth could survive lies, and love could grow where neither person expected it. Julian had recovered remarkably. Though thinner than before his imprisonment, laughter had returned to his voice. He spent his days restoring Wycliffe estate and exposing the corruption that had nearly destroyed his family. He and Evelyn had spoken honestly about their marriage. Their union and love had been real, but the life they had imagined could not simply be restored. Too much had changed and Julian knew it. One evening, Julian found Adrian in the library. You have avoided speaking to her, Julian said. Adrian closed the book before him. I will not pressure her. That is why she trusts you. Adrian looked toward the window. I will never ask her to choose me because I protected her. Julian placed a small velvet box on the desk. Adrian stared at it. What is that? A wedding ring. My father gave it to me years ago. He said it belonged to the man who loved a Wycliffe woman enough to let her be free. Adrian looked at the ring. I cannot accept this. You can. Julian pushed it toward him. I loved Evelyn. I still love the woman she was. But I have learned something during those months in chains. Love is not ownership. Julian continued. She deserves the man who sees her as she is now. That night, Adrian found Evelyn in the garden. She stood beside the old stone fountain, one hand resting over her child. You knew, she said. About what? That Julian spoke to you. Adrian stopped. He told me you had a choice to make. Evelyn looked at him. And what choice do you want me to make? His answer came slowly. None. She frowned. I will not ask you to repay a debt that never existed, Adrian said. I protected you because you deserved protection. I loved you before I admitted it to myself. And if you choose Julian, I will still help you build the life you want. Tears filled her eyes. You make it very difficult to leave you. A quiet smile touched his face. I was hoping you might stay. She stepped closer. Do you remember what you told me in the market? I remember everything. You said England had no right to decide my worth. Evelyn took his hand. Then don't let me make the mistake of deciding yours. Adrian's breath caught. She leaned against him. I love you. For once, the Duke had no guarded response. He simply held her. Months later, on the first snow of winter, Evelyn returned to the same courtyard where her life had changed. Lanterns glowed beneath the evening sky. There were no jeering voices now. No accusations. No thrown fruit. Only family and friends gathered beneath the winter stars. Julian stood beside the fountain, holding the newborn child. His eyes were wet when he saw Evelyn approach Adrian. You look happy, he whispered. I am. Julian smiled. Then so am I. Adrian took Evelyn's hand. The first time I saw you here, he said, you had nothing except a worn cloak, a silver locket, and a child everyone else called a disgrace. Now you have a home. He lowered himself onto one knee. You once told the world your child had done nothing wrong. I want to spend the rest of my life making sure neither of you ever has to defend your right to be loved again. He opened the velvet box. Inside lay the ring Julian had given him. Evelyn Hartwell, will you become my wife? She laughed through her tears. Yes. The crowd erupted in applause. Julian lifted the baby, smiling as though the past had finally loosened its grip. Adrian rose and kissed Evelyn gently. Snow began falling around them. For one brief moment, Evelyn remembered the woman she had been the previous winter. Frightened, humiliated, and alone. Not merely rescue. Not revenge. A home filled with warmth. A child sleeping safely. A husband who had chosen her without shame. And a first love who had found peace in letting her go. When Evelyn turned toward the market road, she saw the townspeople watching. The same people who had once thrown eggs and tomatoes now bowed their heads. She did not bow back. She simply smiled. Then Adrian wrapped his arm around her, and their child reached toward the falling snow. The bells of Blackthorne House began to ring. She had once believed she was carrying the shame of a disgraced lord. Now she understood the truth. She had been carrying hope. The child had been the proof that Julian was innocent, the reason his enemies feared her, and the thread that had led truth back into the light. But Adrian had given her something no evidence ever could. He had given her a future. And as snow covered the footprints of the woman she had once been, Evelyn walked beside the Duke toward home. This time she was not entering as a scandal. She was entering as the woman who had survived England's hatred and found something stronger than it. Love.